So, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to what is one of the very first kind of CEO series that we've done here at Scaled. And it gives me a great pleasure actually to introduce Antonio, the CEO of a very well respected e-com agency that you guys will know very well, I'm sure. Rather than it coming from my mouth, it's often better coming from the people that created it, right? So, a good place to start, maybe a bit of scene setting. So, do you want to kind of give us a bit of an elevator pitch to Novos and kind of where you came from and what you guys are all about?
Yeah, sounds good. Hello, first of all. We set up Novos about just over 5 years ago. So myself and Sam, who's my co-founder, we both came from in-house backgrounds, but we'd met at agency before that. So we sort of worked agency side and in-house. So Sam went to made.com, where he was SEO manager there, and he sort of like led the whole movement away from the Lions paid for made.com. And then I was at the Gentleman's Journal magazine at the time, sort of like doing up everything online because they had a big reliance on print. So it's like, how can they rely more on online? But then one gap that we saw was just the SEO market or like industry, I guess, in terms of agencies, but for e-commerce brands. And it just wasn't there. Every agency was working across a lot of different industries, whereas we just saw that gap for let's just do SEO, no other channels, and let's just do it for e-com brands, no other businesses. And it scaled from there really. So we're just over 40 people now at the agency. We still only do SEO for e-commerce brands a few years later. We've got a team, we focus on international SEO. So we focus on the on-site aspect, so SEO strategy piece, the digital PR piece, and then there's the content production side of things. My role has kind of adapted like so much in the last 5 years as well. It's like wherever the business needs us, Sam and I kind of go, if that makes sense. So now how it sort of worked out is I'm a lot more on the external side, so sales, new biz, brand side, whereas Sam's a lot more on the internal sort of operational side. And that's kind of how we've divvied it up. And then last year we became an employee-owned agency. So that was essentially like we sold the company to the trust. The trust now is like the predominant sort of shareholder in the company, and then all of the team and the employees are beneficiaries of that. So it's basically a John Lewis kind of model where everyone's like we call them co-owners in the agency. And the reason we did it that way is just it's more sustainable for us for the long term for the agency. Gives me and Sam a lot more flexibility in terms of not being like given these insane targets we just know we'll never achieve. And it also just increases the motivation of the team long term as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people listening will be very intrigued by that. Obviously, there was news, kind of breaking news when you did that kind of move over to, the kind of employee trust. And, a lot of people will probably be thinking about, how and if that could work for them, because, not many people, you're a bit of a trailblazer, in doing that. And I think, given the market as well, the one thing you probably didn't mention, which I'm sure has been really helpful to you, is how that model has helped you retain staff as well. And we know how difficult that's been. So I guess my question then is, if you were to rewind time, and go back to the point of this decision making on that, would you still make that the same decision? And has it worked out for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely would. Like we set up the agency. One of the biggest things for us was we came from toxic backgrounds. We kind of know what a toxic culture looks like at a company. There had to be a different way of doing it, especially in the agency world. Like you'll know, it's intense. It's constant. There's rudeness at times from clients internally. There's a lot of mixed community. There's something always happening in the agency world. So we kind of said if we can go at it in a people first approach where we look after the people. People is essentially our product in the agency industry. We can look after the people, they'll look after the clients, and that'll look after our growth. And once we kind of had that in place and we proved that concept, we made all these epic lists like campaigns, best place to work, etc. Then we were sort of alerted of this is a way of potentially doing it where we go down the employee ownership route. And we had offers to be acquired, and like we kind of explored that, and we're like, well, what does an exit look like? Because naturally there's got to be something that we have to do to pass it on so it is sustainable. But as soon as we found this out, there was no other option for us. We kind of said no to everything else and yes to this. And the impact it's had since, it's hard to measure because it has only been a year, and obviously this is a long-term thing, but we can, like, it has been a figuring out process, I think, for us as well as the whole team. Like, what does it actually mean to be employee owned? And so we established like the people committee. So they're the voices essentially internally that speak on behalf of the rest of the team. That gets brought to the trust. So in their board meetings every quarter, everything is discussed that the employees bring up. We've obviously figured out the financial aspects, so like the profit share and kind of what that looks like for the team. And I think the more we figure out, the more the team really are buying into it. And we have then seen the impact on the team bought into the vision of what the agency wants to achieve. They're bought into kind of the direction we're going. They feel like they have a voice. The turnover obviously is a lot like reduced because the team kind of know I can benefit from this long term, but financially as well. So definitely it's early days to apply exact data to say this is how it's been a game changer for us, but it's one of those we can feel it has been, and in the next sort of 3 to 5 years we'll see the big impact of that decision.
Yeah, like any big change, it requires integration and work and a lot of communication, right, to get right. So it'd be very interesting to see how that plays out. And just to give us a sense of, you talked about the kind of number of people, and obviously you can only share what you can share, but is there anything else that will give people a feel for either your kind of pace of growth? So, like how you've gone from 0 to 40 people over what period of time, and like what those annual jumps look like, and or any kind of view on, kind of turnover margin, any of those things that you can share, obviously understanding that you might not want to, just to give people a sense of, that kind of that growth journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So we hired our first employee who's still with us today, Nicole, in 2019. So that was like the first time where we made this conscious decision to hire, because Sam and I, we were sharing 25 clients at the time between the two of us, as well as running a business. We were working a lot, put it that way. So we just said, now's the time to actually scale this. So then from that, we obviously grew to around 35 people early last year to obviously now 40. So in the space of about 3 to 4 years, we pretty much hired most of our employees through COVID, so remotely. So that was a massive challenge, but we scaled very quickly in terms of headcount, and then sort of grown around 100% year on year in terms of revenue, up until sort of this year where it's been a bit less, around 25%, but that's because we've made more of a conscious effort on efficiency over just like growth. And like the big thing for us, and like the big target for us, is to hit that 1 million net profit mark. And that for us that for us is like a growth target, which is, it's achievable, but that will sort of show us that actually we know how to operate an efficient agency. The team will then obviously be rewarded and benefit from that with the profit share and stuff like this, are being employee owned. So it's kind of like a full circle of that's where we want to get to. We're getting closer, and that's kind of like, yeah, we've grown really quickly in the last few years, and it's now just taking what we've got and just making it a lot more efficient.
Yeah, the efficiency point is one that will not be lost on most people listening, I'm sure. And I guess that kind of level of growth, particularly in the early days, doesn't come without its challenges, and particularly around efficiency, right? As you and I know. So right now, what if you were to kind of summarize, because it's a stressful thing, isn't it, running an agency that's growing fast with lots of people, and lots of people reliant on you to pay mortgages and stuff. So what's keeping you awake at night at the moment? What are the big things that are kind of concerning you?
It's a good question. I think I mean it's been ever since the start, and I think anyone that runs a business will understand it. I think the uncertainty in general of day to day is something that it takes me a lot of time to just get over it, but just the uncertainty of what could this look like? How is this going? I think cash flow, naturally, it doesn't matter how much money as a business owner you have in the bank, in the business, you will always worry about cash flow terms. So that's like, what's our run rate? How are we looking 3, 6, 9, 12 months from now? That's always something that just I just make sure we've got processes ironed out for that, and we've got really good planning and forecasting in place. I think those are the two key things that they're just there always as a business owner, just in terms of just like you worry about them. But I think apart from that, there isn't anything that like keeps me up at night per se. I think it's, as long as you've got like, we've got very good control over kind of like the different core functions of the business. We trust the team we've got in place. Like, I know we've got a phenomenal team that can deliver the best work across the industry, and I've got no doubt about that. And that's not even just an ego thing. I'll put my hands up, like, I know how good they are. So I think that part of things doesn't actually concern me. It's more just the granular elements, I think, that any business owner will always think about and worry about and wonder, oh, could we do more with this? Have we got enough for this? Are we making the right call on that? If that makes sense.
Yeah, like so they say the macroeconomic kind of impact of, and you'll have appreciated this through COVID, like everybody else, is that there are, the black swan events, so to speak, that you don't necessarily see coming and can't plan for. Can you survive? And I think every business owner has had a crash course in that, hasn't there, over the last couple of years? So I'm sure
Yeah.
So you've been along this journey. What would be the greatest thing that you wish you knew at the start that you know now? Because experience, as I often talk about, is the kind of shortcut to success in many respects. And so it's easier once you know, but then you've got to go through the process to know. So is there anything that you really do wish that you knew from the beginning that you therefore would have done differently from the beginning?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a very like logical person. I need things in front of me or just numbers to make sense of something. But like one thing I know now, wish I knew it at the start, was just the whole trust the people around you and honestly just trust your gut. And it's hard to define what that is for different people that look like different things. But the amount of times, especially in the early days, where I had this sense of doubt of like, will we see this? Will we get past this? Or actually, I'm not sure if we're going to get to 10 people. Or I'm not sure if we'll get to 1 million in revenue. That just seems crazy when people talk about it to you and you just don't really think it'll happen. But then you see the work going on around you. You get people around you supporting you and say, this is possible. This is what could happen. But then also, you just need to trust your gut. So I think I definitely would say, like, if you're running a business, you've got a good team in place. You trust your own abilities. You've got a handle on the numbers and you're not making any of those sort of like silly basic mistakes. I think just trust your gut and just know, like, if you have a vision for something, you can make it happen. Just trust yourself with it. And I wish I did that more in the early days, because I think I spent more time doubting than planning or dreaming. And the one negative of that, I think, is that I just never really had a chance to reflect on all the epic stuff that happened throughout the agency. And it's only now 5.5 years in where I'm starting to actually realize we've built such a great thing and this is awesome. I spent so much of my time worrying about the next thing, worrying about will this happen, rather than actually just taking it at face value and believing we could do it. So that's obviously a personality trait, but I definitely say that's one thing I wish I did more at the start, is just rolled with it rather than doubted before rolling with it.
And have you, because that really resonates actually, the kind of the whole thing about, always looking forward and never looking back, or even actually kind of probably presently. Has there been a moment or more than one moment where it's kind of hit you? I can certainly think of a couple that happened to me, in that, all of a sudden there's all this stuff happening around you and you have a moment in time where you're just like, how did we get here? That in a really positive way. Can you think of any of those kind of moments?
Yeah, there's been a few milestones. Like, definitely the first one, I think, was when Sam and I both became quiet, just not involved in the day-to-day. Like, when you're so heavily involved in the day-to-day as a business owner, you know everything. You're involved with every client. You're involved with every single conversation that's going on. And then as soon as you've got a team in place that are doing all of that, you almost get to a point where you're a bit like, wow, okay, I've essentially made myself redundant, which is weird, but great at the same time. So I think when that happened, that was the first time for me where I realized, like, this was a big step. I think then when we sold the company and became employee owned, I think naturally, like probably everyone in the industry, they see that people don't really know what it is. People don't really get it or why we've done it. And that's an education piece, because it's a new kind of way to exit, I guess, especially in our industry. But I think when that happened for us, that was again a big moment, because we knew we'd done something different. We'd sort of disturbed the status quo a little bit. We've done what's perfect for us. And that was sort of like our dream of doing it that way. And that was another step where I realized this is a really great thing to recognize. So I think those two, like the main parts of the business where you kind of really have to stop and you're forced to almost reflect a bit.
Yeah, that it is important to do that, isn't it? Because like you say, it's so hard to get to where you've got to, that you have to have the ability sometimes to appreciate, what you have built. And I'm sure that COVID was a huge test, and I'm, very welcome to kind of talk about, the realities of how that hit. But I think we've heard those stories a lot, haven't we? But what I'm really interested in is how, and if you know, particularly now, because you know remote is a much bigger thing, you know, however remote you were beforehand is a different question, but being with remote now being much bigger, how have you made that work, and what changes have you made to ensure that it does work a bit better? Because I think what everybody's interested in, the little tips and tricks that, you know, may help kind of particularly with culture, because it's difficult doing that when you're not all sat together, right?
Yeah, it's been a challenge. I think it's been really hard. Like I said, like we hired most of our team through like from COVID when it first hit and beyond. So I think when COVID hit, we were 8 people, I think, in the agency, and we were always in the office. That's just what it was. We used to say to people, work from home if you want to. No one ever wanted to, because before that it just wasn't a thing. And especially in London, people want to get out. They want to go to an office and go to work. So for us, yeah, that was a bit different than hiring remotely. The transition itself was fine. We already had work set up for remote working in terms of just equipment and stuff like that. So we were already set up for it. It's just hiring throughout COVID was really hard, because to attract talent, everyone in the industry was offering things like fully remote, business equipment, all paid for up to X amount. So it's like you then obviously have to find a way to compete with that works for you. And then naturally, as we kind of went out of the persistent and consistent lockdowns, it gets to a point then when you start getting asked questions as like founders, like, what's the stance? Like, what's going on? Like, I've got one side of the company going like, I want more people in the office because I want to socialize again. But I've got the other half which is saying, I've got so much savings from not traveling anymore. I love the flexibility of being at home. I've got a dog now. Like, and then you're in this weird middle ground where you're like, well, I can't really make a call on behalf of everyone. So I've spoken to loads of different company founders, not just agencies, but across D2C and different industries, like, what have they been doing? And the response was so mixed. Like, some were sort of saying, we've just set a blanket 3 days a week, everyone in, that's it, we'll deal with the repercussions. Whereas some have gone fully remote. And I think we realized, racking our heads around what do we do. I think we just realized that we have to do something that suits everyone in different ways. So the actual training and development and knowledge stuff, we've got it to a T. We do a lot of remote trainings and stuff, and I think that still works. But the going back to the office, we've just done like a tiering system. So we basically asked everyone just to basically give their own commitments, we've called it. So as you say how often you're going to come in, we'll hold you to that. So it's in your court. And then the sort of like, I guess the motivation then to give a higher amount if you want to come in more is that everyone else around you will know that you're in those days. So then you can get that sort of social element. Whereas those that don't really want to come in, we've kind of set like a minimum blanket of once a quarter we expect everyone in. So that's like the absolute minimum, which 4 times a year we don't think is that much of a hard ask. And the main thing that we've gone with there is that it's not for you to be in the office for anyone to talk, like annoy you or just watch you, but it's actually that cultural aspect. And for us to run these like quarterly, like bigger trainings, because trainings are different, like in person when they're delivered, you can like bounce off of other people, meeting newbies, stuff like that. So it's been tricky. It's been really difficult. There's been other parts that have been easier than others, but I think the main thing for us was actually that one blanket approach just won't work anymore in like the modern company. It just won't. And we had to find a way where we set our own minimum standards, but then try to appease the different types of people, I guess, across the company as well.
Yeah, no, that's a very nice way of doing it. I'm sure a lot of people will be very interested in how you're making that work. So thank you for sharing. I'm kind of, you know, cognizant of the time that we're taking, and you know, we don't want this to kind of, you know, take up your entire day. But I'm really keen, I guess, to ask, you know, as you'd expect to, given the kind of the noise around at the moment, around kind of the view on AI. I mean, I think people are taking a very different view, dependent on, you know, how they see the world and how they see it playing out. So I'm really keen to kind of get a view from you guys as to how, you know, what are you doing about it right now, and how do you see it either playing out or playing a part in, you know, how you run the business.
Yeah, definitely. I think with AI, I was having a conversation with a few people recently about it. One thing that we've always done as a company, and some people might see it as they're indecisive or slow, but we've always stuck by and it's worked for us, is that until we've got concrete data that something either works or it doesn't work, we're not going to have a stance on it. And that was the same for everything throughout the time that we've had the agency. So COVID, and then the metaverse came, and that was a huge thing in our industry. And every time there's a Google algorithm update, it's the end of the world when it isn't. And I think it's just like, we always look at things and say, let others panic, let others rush into things, let us observe. And then once we've observed, we'll make an epic decision. So that's the same thing we've got with AI at the minute. Is ChatGPT, the different AI platforms, they're evolving really quickly, but there's not enough data to suggest that they're either doing a really, really good thing or they're not. There's not enough data to show that they're a secure thing to use or that they're not, like either way. So I think, yeah, our stance at the minute is we're monitoring it. We know what's happening, sort of like with Bing and Google at the moment. They're developing their own sort of like partnerships and their own platforms. So we're monitoring that and like what we're going to do there. But our main thing at the moment is stick to right now what's working. The team, if they want to use ChatGPT to make certain things easier or to be able to scope their own project management side of things out or stuff like that, we've said go for it if you want to. If there's something you feel like ChatGPT could save you an hour doing from yourself, like from your own day, go for it. But it's not something we use as part of like our services at the minute in terms of like writing content, because I still don't, again, have enough data to show that that works. But it's one of those where people are going to talk about it a lot. It's obviously rising. We're going to keep an eye on it until we have just data to show that this is a safe thing to do and it really works and it's being massively adopted. We'll jump on it and we'll definitely loop it into kind of like our USP and services. But that's kind of like our stance at the minute. That's why I don't really talk about it much on LinkedIn or engage much in it. That's what we've kind of always done until we know a bit more about it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. A very sensible approach. And I think, like you say, I think the history of algorithm changes, from the very first days of Panda and Penguin, etc. I think they taught us all as kind of digital people a lot about change and the ability to kind of hold and wait and see how it plays out. So I think a very sensible approach. So before we finish, quick fire round, if that's okay. Thought it's a nice way to kind of round this out. So we'll run through these very quickly. 4 quick questions. Firstly, what are you guys the best in the world at?
Looking after a team that works in an agency industry or agency environment.
Perfect. Top 3 attributes for a successful agency founder to have. It's an interesting one.
That's a really good one. Consistency, resilience, and it's not one word, but just obsessive attention to detail. Don't know how to put that into one word.
Yeah, nice. What is your top agency growth tip?
Top agency growth tip: understand your USP, know how to deliver your USP, and stick to your USP regardless of what happens and sort of like externally.
Great. And final question. I think I know the answer to this, but it's always interesting and intriguing to ask. Would you rather win one £100,000 a month client or 6 £10,000 a month clients?
6 £10,000 a month clients. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, a little safer. Plays into the ethos that you've been talking through as we've chatted. It makes complete sense. Look, thank you, Antonio, and I really appreciate that. And obviously, your chance for people to find you and follow you. If you want to kind of share some details, if they've got any further follow-up questions, do so. It'd be great to understand where people can catch you. What's the best platform?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm on LinkedIn, Antonio Wedral. So you'll find me on there. And then our website as well is just thisisnovos.com. So any of those 2 areas. So I'm mainly active on LinkedIn, but you can find us on the website as well, and you can read a bit more about us.
Perfect. Well, look, been brilliant having you on. Thank you, Antonio, once again. And let's hope that 2023 plays out as you hope and you get to that big number.